Well, it looks like there was some interest in my switch plates, so Containment Crew sent me over 2 of them to go over kind of the details of what all is going on, some of the design choices that I wanted out of them, and how to properly install them. And you'll notice that there aren't any switches in here because they don't come with switches, so Containment Crew also sent me some switches to go over the whole installation process, because there is a little bit of work you have to do before they are up and running. But don't worry, I'm going to go over everything, so let's jump right in. One of the first things I thought of when it came to going over this board is why you might want to use this board over the Kelly Industry one, since the Kelly Industry one is easy, it's all been kind of done for you, it's in one simple package, etc., etc. And the reasons that you might not want to use that board will differ from person to person depending on who you talk to. Some people's circuits may not use the board right, or maybe they want to just wire it up differently that the board doesn't offer, and maybe, you know, I don't know, you want to DIY your circuit yourself. The reasons are going to differ. The Kelly Industry board is great, might not be for everyone, so this is just another option out there. But let's talk about the board and kind of the first thing you have to do with this, and that is getting it all set up. So when you get your switches, and if they come with levers like these, you're gonna notice that the levers are pretty long and won't really fit within the board space, so you will have to cut these down in order for them to fit. So get yourself some nifty little clippers or a Dremel, that will work as well. And you just have to cut the levers down until they fit. So I'm gonna do that right now. For the lever of the pusher switch, the switch that goes at the top here, you don't have to take off as much, you just have to take off enough so that it rides in this little flat section right there. You can see that there's just a little bit that needs to be shaved down, but you can cut off as much as you want as long as it fits within that under flat side area right there. So I'm gonna go with about that much. You just screw it in like normal. With all the switches in, there is one thing you should do before you start wiring this up, and that is check this piece right here for very smooth movement. Mine's a bit sticky, so I'm gonna sand that down just a tiny bit and maybe give it a little bit of lubrication for smoother operation. You just remove these 2 screws right here, and you can see how this mechanism works, just like with the stock Rapidstrike piece. So I'm gonna smooth down the top, the bottom, and the sides, and I can feel there's a little bit of an overhang of 3D print right here. So I'm gonna get that done really quick. All right, and that should be much smoother now. Yeah, that's much better. With the switches now installed, let's talk about some of the design choices that were made with this switch plate, why we added them in there, and what makes this switch plate stand out a bit more than other switch plates. And let's talk about probably one of the first things you'll notice, and that is the larger switches. Now, with MOSFETs becoming more of a popular thing and becoming more standardized, you don't need to put larger switches in your stuff because the MOSFET handles a lot of the amp load and does the magical thing that MOSFETs do. So why would we add them in here? If you aren't using a MOSFET, this gives you a bit more buffer between the time that your switch burns out compared to smaller amperage switches. But the main reason, and I'm not gonna lie, this is the main reason, the activation force and the feel of a 21 amp switch is lovely, and there's something about it that I just can't get enough of. I guess the best way to describe it is like the difference between a membrane keyboard and a mechanical keyboard. There's just something about that click that I really, really like and is so satisfying to do. That's really the main reason why this has 21 amp switches. Now I could just say, oh, you know, bigger buffer, whatever. No, it's the feel. Yeah, that's kind of the main reason, coupled with the fact that it gives you a larger buffer in case you aren't using a MOSFET or you're not comfortable getting those set up yet, even though that should be standardized. But I do like having a larger buffer with the switches, but mainly it's the feel. Another thing that goes into kind of the feel sort of aspect of the switch plate, but is also a functionality thing, is the main trigger. We'll talk about a little bit more about the design of this trigger in a bit, but if you look at the back of it right here, you'll notice that it has this slight angle upward where it contacts the lever. And this just makes it take more pressure to push in before that switch is activated. And it's kind of like a reliability thing. I've shot off blasters during HVZ by accident just because my finger has, you know, twitched and pushed this in, or I brushed up against it. This just requires you to use more force before it goes in so that when you want to fire, it will fire because you have to push it in there. If you just kind of brush up against it or tap it a little bit, nothing's really gonna happen. So I really like that, I dig it. Not everyone's gonna like the harder draw on it, but that's, you know, that's that. Another feel and aesthetic thing is, of course, the Bobololo style rev trigger, kind of based off of the Foam Blast design with the wider, more straight area right here. It feels good. If you've used a Bobo style rev trigger, I've heard people really enjoy them and prefer them over the stock one. Sticks out a bit more, puts it in line with this, and this piece right here on top with the screw just keeps the rev trigger from bowing out that way when you come in from the right side. This was a design choice they had to add in later because it was something I noticed, so I made one out of polycarb and epoxy putty, and then they put that into work. So like with the Blaster Tech switch plate, you'll notice that it has a little cover right there, and that's just to keep this from flinging out. But of course, you can take this off and take your switch out if need be, if you want to lubricate it, sand it down, make your own trigger, whatever, like that. The most important part of the switch plate, though, comes in the form of this piece right here. This is the piece that the pusher arm rides against that activates this switch right here that tells the pusher arm to, hey, stop, it's time to stay in place, we're done firing. With other switch plates, mainly the BSUK one, they have a really small piece that you glue onto the lever arm, and every time I've installed that, I've had to take time to fit it properly. I've had to take double A's and just put them on the pusher motor to slowly, you know, bring it in and out until I get it at the right point, which I then super glue into place or hot glue into place. I have to adhere it down. This is a very reliable setup. It's based off the stock Rapidstrike mechanism. If you were to open up a Rapidstrike right now, you would see something that looks exactly like this and kind of works in the exact same way with the how it activates the switch. This just makes reliability with a pusher arm really top notch. Has a lot of surface area for that pusher arm to ride against and a lot of area for it to push down. And it's just such a simple mechanism. It's the mechanism I prefer, works really well. It is such a simple design with such good reliability. Like I said, it just works, and this is a very important part of the switch setup, so you don't want that messing up or being something you have to fiddle with, especially later on down the road with having to open up your blaster and redo this. So really happy this is in here, and I think if you buy the switch plate, you'll note that this is a really simple but effective piece right here. That is the most important part of the switch plate in my opinion. And the last thing to sort of mention, and this is something people are either gonna like or they're not gonna like, or maybe they'll feel indifferent about it, is the main switch right here is 3D printed. It's based off of the stock Rapidstrike trigger, at least at the front right here, so it's kind of the same width, but it is 3D printed and it is sort of a proprietary design with this switch plate. I know people might prefer to take a stock Rapidstrike trigger out, cut it down to work with the switch plate, but you know, this is just goes with this switch plate. So that does mean you won't be able to put something like a Big Zen Z trigger in here or something that's resin cast, or you just go to Goodwill, find a Rapidstrike for cheap and then pull the trigger out of that. So I thought I'd mention that because that is something that people ask about. Yes, this is a 3D printed trigger and it is proprietary to the switch plate. Installation of the switch plate is super easy. I have here a stock Rapidstrike, and all it requires you to do is take out the switch plate, cut out all the disgusting stock wires that you encounter because you're going to be replacing those. You know how this works if you've modified a Rapidstrike. And this is a good opportunity to show the similarities between the two pieces right here. You can see they're basically the exact same thing and they work on almost the exact same principle. The only difference is this one has a little push down segment on it right here, but basically the exact same. So before you do install the switch plate, I always recommend shaving down a couple of these ribs right here. This one, and even this one. It does lessen some of the support, but it does give you pathway to put some wires. And one thing you will have to do is you'll have to knock down this post. At least I have to do it on mine. There is an opening for it right here in the switch plate, but it seems to be a bit too tall. So I'm gonna knock that down just a little bit. This post right up here may get in the way a little bit, but there's a cutout on the back of the switch plate right here that can accommodate it with a little bit of movement. You just kind of push that down into place. There we go. You will have to cut off some of the insides supports of the Rapidstrike, but this is just basic. This is just basic Rapidstrike stuff. Get that one as well. And if I'm not mistaken, you will want to remove this post right here as well, because it will get in the way of the tab on this side. Again, basic Rapidstrike switch plate procedure stuff. And I usually get it, you know, flat and flush. You can fill that in with epoxy if you're gonna be painting it as a bunch of screws fall out. But yeah, you just plug that hole with some epoxy and you can paint over that, make it look really nice. Yep, there we go. All right, so that's all you have to do to get your switch plate in. It does take a little bit of removing and editing of your Rapidstrike shell, but now that it's in, there we go, and it should not move around, so maybe you don't have to add any hot glue. I think it's being held in by that peg right here pretty well. But if you want a little bit of extra security, a little dab of hot glue right on that post, and a little bit of hot glue right here also helps a little bit. So put a dab there, and quickly get this on and slam that in. But that's all you have to do to install it before you wire it up. And when it comes to wiring up, you know, you can do whatever sort of 3-switch thing you want with it. But do note that this tab right here on the pusher switch is very close to the trigger, so if you can, try and do it on the outside. However, if you need to, you can always take the screw out, shave down the top of that just a little bit to make more room, and it will work, because that's what I did on the prototype I used at Indoor. This is just shave down this little area of the trigger right here. So that's really all there is to installing your switch plate. I'm not gonna do a whole soldering this thing up, because I already did that for the Rapidstrike that I used at Indoor with the prototype in it. And you can see it didn't originally have the cover that comes right here. So I had to make one out of polycarb and a little bit of epoxy to get the same results. But with a MOSFET placed in the stock, which is not the most efficient way of wiring everything up, yeah, it works perfectly fine. Had no troubles with it during Indoor. And yeah, worked like it should, so there you go. Before we get into the price and the conclusion of this video, I gotta thank my Patreon supporters. At the $10 level, we have Taybeck, Jorge Verdine, Biggs NZ, Ollie No, Scott Tomlin, and Foam Blast. And at the $20 level, we have Ryan Cho. A big thank you to them and the other Patreon tier supporters for their support of this channel. If you want to support this channel outside of watching some ads, you can go check out the Patreon link down in the description. A big thank you to them. Let's conclude this video. And now for the big question of how much does this switch plate cost? Just note that it does not come with switches. You'll have to provide those yourself. So when you get it, it will look like this. For a random color base with orange triggers, it is $13. And if you want specific colors for the triggers, it is $15, which I don't think is a bad deal at all. While it may not be the complete easy package that the Kelly Industry board is, I think it's a fantastic product. This is kind of like my version of the Blaster Tech one, with the changes that I would like to see in a switch plate, as well as easier availability for people in the US, so they don't have to pay a lot of money to get a really nice switch plate. And I know the Kelly Industry has kind of filled that void a bit, but this is just another option on the market. Has a lot of design choices in there that I really dig. Containment Crew did an excellent job of listening to what I want and putting it into a switch plate. So a big thanks to them. This gets basically a mandatory Bobo tested, Bobo approved, because I did test this and I do approve of it. So it's kind of like Durr. If you are interested in getting one for yourself or for somebody else, there will be a link in the description to where you can get it from containmentcrew.com. Big thanks to them for doing this with me and listening to all the stuff that I wanted and actually putting out a product that I think is really, really awesome. And thanks to you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, have a great day wherever you are.